The chandeliers at the Plaza Hotel glittered like frozen fire above a sea of diamonds, tuxedos, and whispered ambition. It was the night Liam Hayes had been waiting for. The launch of his new luxury tech brand, Hayes Vision. Cameras flashed as he stepped onto the red carpet, his hand resting possessively on the waist of Chloe Monroe, a 25-year-old model whose smile could sell sins. "This is our night," he murmured, tightening his grip. Chloe tilted her chin, soaking in the attention. Every flash of light seemed to erase the last trace of the woman who had once stood by his side, Olivia Carter, his ex-wife. Inside the grand ballroom, champagne flowed like liquid gold. The orchestra played Sinatra, and servers in crisp white jackets balanced trays of oysters and truffle bites. Liam thrived in this world of marble and mirrors. He'd spent years clawing his way from a shared apartment in Queens to this empire. Tonight, he wasn't just celebrating success, he was celebrating freedom. Freedom from a wife who didn't understand ambition, as he'd told himself while signing the divorce papers 6 months ago. But as applause filled the room and Chloe laughed too loudly beside him, a flicker of unease gnawed at him. Olivia used to laugh like that. Soft, real, effortless. He shook the thought away and raised his glass for a toast. "To vision," he declared. "To those bold enough to chase what they deserve." The crowd echoed his cheer, though none noticed the tremor in his voice. Across the ballroom, near the entrance, the air shifted. A hush rolled through the guests like an invisible wave. The doors had opened, and in stepped a woman the photographers didn't recognize at first. She wore a white silk dress that caught the light with every movement, her hair swept elegantly to the side. For a moment, she hesitated, then walked forward with quiet confidence. Olivia Carter. Liam froze mid-sentence, his champagne flute suspended. The murmurs began, spreading like wildfire. "Isn't that his wife?" "Ex-wife," someone corrected. But the correction came too late. The headlines were already being written in whispers. Olivia's eyes met Liam's across the room. No anger. No tears. Only a calm strength he'd never seen before. And then, as Chloe stiffened at his side, Olivia placed a protective hand over the small curve of her belly. Liam's heart stopped. Pregnant. The room fell silent, cameras shifting, curiosity sharpening into scandal. Chloe's painted smile faltered. Liam's throat went dry. Every choice he'd made, every cruel word, every lie, seemed to echo back at him through the glittering chandeliers. And then Olivia smiled, the kind of quiet, devastating smile that said she no longer needed him. Liam's glass slipped from his hand, shattering against the marble floor. Every eye turned to him, and for the first time in his life, the king of the room had no words. The next morning, New York woke up to headlines that glittered with cruelty. CEO's ex-wife shocks, the Plaza Gala, pregnant and radiant while he flaunts model mistress. The tabloids devoured the scandal like wolves. Liam Hayes, once the golden boy of corporate America, was now the man whose arrogance had detonated on live camera. But no one felt the explosion more than Olivia. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Former colleagues, friends, even journalists she'd once managed as a PR director, all reaching out, pretending to care while feeding their curiosity. She muted it all. Sitting on the edge of her bed in her small Brooklyn apartment, she stared at the cracked screen of her iPhone, reading the headline again and again until the words blurred. The photo accompanying it was brutal. Liam grinning beside Chloe in a diamond gown, while Olivia, caught mid-step, glowed under the chandeliers with one hand on her belly. To the world, it looked like poetic revenge. But inside, Olivia felt hollow. She hadn't gone to the plaza to start a scandal. She had gone to return a file that still bore Liam's signature, something she had been too kind, too naïve, to destroy. She hadn't expected to face the man who had thrown her out of his penthouse with nothing but her dignity and a faint positive pregnancy test in her pocket. By noon, the video had gone viral. Gossip channels replayed the moment in slow motion. The glass slipping from Liam's hand, the audible gasp of guests, the ice-cold expression on Chloe's face. Every network wanted a quote. Olivia stayed silent. Silence was power. She had learned that in PR. But deep inside, the humiliation burned. At Hayes Global headquarters on Park Avenue, Liam's assistant avoided eye contact as she handed him his phone. "You might want to see this," she whispered. His inbox was flooded. Board members demanding damage control, investors questioning his judgment. His publicist texted in all caps, "You need to make a statement now." But no statement could fix this. Chloe sat across the room, legs crossed, scrolling through the comments on her iPad. "They're calling me a homewrecker," she hissed. "Do something, Liam." Her tone was shrill, her mask cracking. For the first time, he saw the fame-hungry model for what she was, all surface, no soul. He wanted to shout that this wasn't about her. But wasn't it? She was the reason he'd lost everything that mattered. That evening, Olivia walked to the corner cafe near her apartment, the same one she and Liam used to visit when they were young and broke. The barista, an older woman who remembered her, handed her a latte and whispered, "Hold your head high, honey. The world loves a comeback." Olivia smiled weakly, but when she glanced out the window, a black Mercedes S-Class idled at the curb. Inside, Liam sat alone, watching her through the glass. He didn't enter. He just watched. The man who once ruled boardrooms now powerless against the sight of a woman he had destroyed. Olivia turned away, tears threatening but never falling. She would not give him that satisfaction. Hours later, a message appeared on her phone. "I need to talk. Please." Liam's number. She stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then she deleted it. The next morning, Olivia woke to a fresh storm. Chloe had posted a photo of herself kissing Liam, captioned, "Real love wins." The comments were merciless, but for the first time in months, Olivia didn't feel broken. She whispered to the twins growing inside her, "Let them have their noise. We'll build peace." Outside, the city roared with gossip and greed. But inside her small apartment, beneath the hum of traffic and the faint smell of coffee, a new kind of strength was taking root. And soon, that strength would become the force that would bring the mighty Liam Hayes to his knees. The world moved on quickly, but Olivia Carter's life didn't. Her once bright Manhattan apartment now felt like a museum of ghosts, the scent of Liam's cologne still clinging to the cashmere throw, his Mont Blanc pen abandoned on the desk, the framed wedding photo she couldn't bring herself to throw away. Every object whispered the same cruel truth. She had been replaced. Days bled into nights. Her phone stopped ringing. The PR world that had once adored her now treated her like a cautionary tale. Clients withdrew projects, afraid of being associated with scandal. Former colleagues who had once praised her professionalism now whispered behind closed doors, "Poor Olivia, she was too emotional for that job anyway." The industry could forgive failure, but not public humiliation. Bills piled up. She sold her designer handbags on eBay, one by one. The Cartier bracelet Liam had given her for their anniversary fetched enough to cover rent for 2 months. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had once handled global brand crises, but now she couldn't manage her own. Nights were the worst. Lying awake, she would scroll through her phone, torturing herself with images of Liam and Chloe at charity galas and rooftop parties. Chloe's Instagram was a masterclass in staged perfection, diamond filters, luxury captions, and endless photos of her love, with the hashtag number DreamLife. Each picture was a knife. One evening, unable to bear the silence, Olivia played the old voicemails Liam had left during their happier days. "You're my anchor," one said. "No matter how big I get, you're my home." Hearing it now made her laugh bitterly. Anchors, she realized, weren't meant to be homes. They kept you from moving forward. Her body ached constantly. 6 months pregnant, and surviving on instant noodles and anxiety, she was drowning. The twins inside her kicked occasionally, a reminder that she couldn't give up, not yet. But every day felt heavier than the last. It was during one of those endless nights that the bleeding started. Panic surged through her. She called a cab, clutching her belly as the city lights blurred outside the window. At Lenox Hill Hospital, the nurse's voice was gentle, calm, almost motherly. "You're dehydrated, honey. Stress isn't helping." Huh. When the doctor told her both babies were safe, Olivia broke down for the first time in months, not out of sadness, but relief. That night, lying under sterile white sheets, she whispered to the small lives inside her, "We're going to be okay. I promise." Across town, in a penthouse filled with champagne and self-importance, Liam scrolled through the financial reports of Hayes Global. The numbers looked fine, but something inside him felt off. Chloe laughed on the balcony, posting another photo for her followers, tagging him with number power couple. He didn't even glance up. For the first time, her beauty bored him. He thought of Olivia, not the scandal, not the headlines, but the woman who used to fall asleep on his shoulder while editing his speeches, the one who brewed coffee at 2 a.m. because he had a deadline. He wondered what she was doing now. The thought lingered like a bruise. Meanwhile, Olivia was discharged from the hospital the next morning. She stood outside in the cold November air, her hospital bracelet still on her wrist, and realized she had nothing left to lose. She walked slowly, each step steady, purposeful. Somewhere between heartbreak and exhaustion, her pain had turned into something sharper, resolve. She would rebuild. Not for Liam. Not even for revenge. For the 2 tiny heartbeats inside her that deserved better. And as the city swallowed her small, determined figure, a storm was quietly gathering, one that would soon turn the man who broke her into the man who would beg for her forgiveness. Snow dusted the streets of Brooklyn the morning Olivia Carter realized she couldn't keep living in survival mode. The mirror above her bathroom sink reflected someone she barely recognized. Hollow eyes, tangled hair, and a glowless skin that once turned heads at board meetings. Her hands trembled as she rested them over her belly. The twins kicked softly, as if reminding her that time was moving forward, whether she wanted it to or not. She had been surviving on cheap instant soup and freelance PR gigs that barely covered groceries. Her apartment, a cramped one-bedroom walk-up, smelled faintly of mildew and determination. Outside, delivery trucks rumbled and sirens screamed. The symphony of the city that never cared who broke as long as it kept moving. That morning, a thin envelope from her landlord slipped under the door. Final notice. She stared at the bold red letters until they blurred. Something inside her cracked, but this time it wasn't the fragile kind of breaking. It was the kind that cleared space, the kind that made room for rebirth. By afternoon, she found herself sitting on a park bench near Central Park West, a worn coat wrapped around her, her phone balanced on her lap. She opened her notes app and started typing, "Business idea, emotional wellness platform for women navigating pregnancy and loss." The words came out shaky, but they were the first she'd written for herself in years. Luma Life, that would be the name. Light from life. Her old instincts returned, the strategist, the communicator, the dreamer she used to be before Liam's world consumed her own. She pictured a community for women like her, invisible but unbreakable. One that offered guidance, counseling, and hope. But ideas didn't pay rent. That night, the radiator hissed while she scrolled job boards on her cracked MacBook Air. Every listing felt like a dead end. And then, an email popped up. Subject: from the Blackwell Foundation. Opportunity to discuss a partnership. Sender: Ethan Blackwell. The name struck a faint chord. Ethan Blackwell, the billionaire philanthropist who had once funded the Bright Futures Gala where she'd met Liam years ago. She had handled the PR back then, and Ethan had been kind, almost shy, unlike the egos that filled that ballroom. She remembered his quiet compliment. "You're the calm in a room full of storms." She opened the email. It was brief but personal. "Olivia, I came across your public post about wellness advocacy. I remember your professionalism from years ago. I'd like to discuss a consulting opportunity. Something meaningful. Something aligned with what you once believed in." Her heart pounded. For a moment, she thought it might be a scam. But the email's signature was real. Blackwell Holdings, 5th Avenue. She hesitated only a second before replying. 2 days later, she stood outside the glass tower of Blackwell Holdings, snow melting on her coat collar. The receptionist smiled. "Mr. Blackwell is expecting you." "Shend?" When Ethan entered the room, he was dressed simply, charcoal suit, no tie, soft gray eyes that held warmth without pity. "It's been a while, Miss Carter," he said gently. "You've been through a storm." Her voice cracked. "I'm still in it." He nodded, studying her carefully. "Then let's help you step out of it." That was the moment everything changed. The offer wasn't charity. It was partnership, a small consulting role to develop wellness content for one of his philanthropic initiatives. It wasn't much, but it was purpose. As she left the building, the city looked different, sharper, alive again. She paused on the sidewalk, snowflakes melting in her hair, and smiled for the first time in months. What she didn't know was that this single meeting would ignite a chain of events powerful enough to rebuild her life and make the man who left her wish he never had. The morning light spilled through the tall windows of the Blackwell Foundation's office, warming the polished oak desk where Olivia Carter now Saturday. It had been 3 weeks since Ethan Blackwell had given her the chance that would quietly change everything. At first, she couldn't believe anyone would hire her again after the scandal. But Ethan hadn't looked at her with judgment, only respect. "Your fall doesn't erase your brilliance," he had told her. And somehow, she had believed him. Her role was small, drafting press releases, crafting campaign pitches, helping shape the narrative of Blackwell's new women's health initiative, but to Olivia, it felt monumental. It meant stability, a paycheck, and something she hadn't felt in months: dignity. Each morning, she arrived early with her notebook and her thermos of homemade coffee, ready to prove she still mattered. Ethan's office overlooked Central Park, a view framed by floor-to-ceiling glass that seemed to shimmer in the morning sunday. He was often already there when she arrived, typing on his MacBook Pro, his black Mont Blanc pen resting beside his papers. He wasn't like other CEOs, no entourage, no arrogance. He listened. He asked questions that mattered. And though he was one of the most powerful men in Manhattan, he treated her as an equal. One afternoon, as snow began to fall outside, he stopped by her desk. "Do you still paint?" he asked. She blinked, surprised. "How did you know?" "You mentioned it once at the gala years ago," he said, smiling slightly. "You said painting helped you find balance." She laughed softly. "That was another lifetime." "Maybe it's time to find it again," he replied. Then, almost as an afterthought, "We're hosting a wellness retreat in the Hamptons next month. I'd like you to lead the storytelling workshop." Her heart skipped. "Me, but I'm—" "Exactly who we need," Ethan interrupted. "Real. Honest. Someone who's lived the stories we want to tell." That night, back in her apartment, Olivia sat by the window, sketching for the first time in years. Outside, the city buzzed, but for once, she felt peace. She thought of the twins growing inside her, tiny reminders of strength, and whispered, "We're getting there." The next morning, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Olivia Carter?" The voice was familiar, deep, cautious. "Liam." Her breath caught. "What do you want?" "I heard you're working with Blackwell," he said slowly. "I just wanted to check if you're okay." "Why would you care?" she replied, keeping her tone even. Silence stretched on the line. "Because I do. I made mistakes. I shouldn't have." She cut him off. "You shouldn't have what? Chosen your ego? Or your model?" "Olivia, please," he said, voice strained. "Can we meet?" She stared out the window, the skyline glittering with 1,000 lights. "No," she whispered. "Not now. Maybe not ever." She hung up before he could answer. Across town, in his luxury penthouse, Liam stood frozen, phone still in hand. The rejection hit harder than he expected. For the first time in his life, he felt what Olivia had once felt: powerless. Meanwhile, at the Blackwell Foundation, Ethan noticed Olivia's shaken expression when she arrived that afternoon. "Rough morning?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Just ghosts." He offered a reassuring smile. "Then let's build something stronger than ghosts." Olivia exhaled slowly. For the first time, she realized she wasn't just surviving anymore, she was rebuilding. Piece by piece, day by day. What she didn't know was that while she was learning to rise again, Liam Hayes was about to begin his fall, and the world would be watching every painful second. The first day Olivia Carter walked into the new Lumalife workspace, sunlight poured through the panoramic windows, painting everything in gold. The office sat high above Central Park, a shared co-working suite buzzing with young founders, creatives, and quiet ambition. It smelled faintly of coffee, fresh paint, and possibility. For the first time in years, Olivia wasn't someone's wife or scandal. She was a woman building something of her own. Her desk was simple, a refurbished wood table, a small plant. And her old MacBook Air, its edges dented but loyal. She typed the words, "Empowering women to heal through connection," across the top of a blank proposal for Lumalife's first official partnership. It wasn't much yet, just an idea, a mission, but every keystroke brought it closer to reality. Ethan Blackwell had quietly approved seed funding, calling it an investment in purpose. Every morning, Olivia arrived before sunrise, balancing a bag of croissants and her swelling belly. The twins were now 7 months along, kicking like impatient little hearts. Her routine became a rhythm of rebirth: coffee, brainstorming, calls, and quiet smiles as she watched her dream take shape. Across the city, Ethan kept an eye on her progress. He admired her discipline: no drama, no self-pity, just relentless focus. "You remind me of someone," he said one evening as they reviewed campaign drafts. "Who?" she asked. "My mother," he said softly. "She built her own company after my father left. People told her she couldn't. She proved them wrong." Olivia smiled faintly. "Then, maybe I'm in good company." As Lumalife's digital prototype took form, Olivia started connecting with other women, single mothers, survivors, dreamers. She interviewed them via Zoom from her small apartment, using her phone camera propped on a stack of Amazon boxes. Each story added a thread to the fabric she was weaving. It was no longer just about survival, it was about legacy. But success didn't come quietly. A week later, a journalist from the Daily Ledger reached out, requesting an interview. "We'd like to feature your new venture," the woman said. "You're quite the story, a fallen PR director rising again under Ethan Blackwell's mentorship." Olivia hesitated. "Only if you focus on the work, not my past." "Of course," the journalist promised. The article went live that Friday. From scandal to startup, Olivia Carter redefined strength. The photo shoot captured her perfectly standing by the window in a cream blazer, her hand resting protectively over her belly. The comments section flooded with support. "Inspiring. She's glowing. Proof that grace beats gossip." But not everyone was happy. Across Manhattan, Liam Hayes saw the article flash across his iPad screen while sitting in his corner office at Hayes Global. His jaw tightened as he read her name beside Ethan Blackwell's. "She's milking this," he muttered, tossing the tablet aside. Chloe, lounging nearby in a silk robe, looked up lazily. "You mean the pregnant ex-wife story? It's kind of empowering. People love that." "People love her," Liam snapped. "She's not supposed to win." That night, Olivia sat on her couch, scrolling through hundreds of encouraging messages from women she'd never met. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: belonging. Her twins kicked again, as if celebrating their mother's small victory. Ethan called just before midnight. "You read the article?" "Yes," she said softly. "It's surreal." He paused, his tone warm. "You've earned it, Olivia. You've come farther than you think." But as she hung up, snow began falling outside her window, each flake glowing under the city lights. She placed her hand over her heart and whispered, "We're going to be okay." But miles away, as Liam scrolled through her smiling photos again, something inside him twisted, a jealousy darker than he'd ever known, one that would soon consume everything he thought he controlled. By spring, Lumalife had become more than a project, it was a quiet revolution. Olivia Carter's name began circulating in business circles again, this time not as a scandal but as a success story. Podcasts invited her to speak about resilience. Magazines featured her soft-spoken grace beside words like strength, reinvention, and hope. Each appearance made her heart race, not from vanity but from disbelief. She had finally stepped out of the shadow of Liam Hayes. Yet in the world of power and ego, no resurrection goes unnoticed. Inside the sleek glass headquarters of Hayes Global, whispers had begun to spread. "Did you see Olivia Carter's startup valuation?" one executive murmured during a board meeting. "Rumor is Ethan Blackwell's backing her." Another added, "She's trending higher than our new wellness division." Liam sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. But beneath the crisp navy suit and the practiced calm, something corrosive churned. He'd dismissed her once as weak, emotional, forgettable. Now she was everything the media adored, a symbol of grace after betrayal. Her face was everywhere, her voice calm and clear, while his company's latest product launch had flopped. That night, back at his penthouse, Liam poured himself a glass of Macallan and stared out at the Manhattan skyline. Chloe Monroe lounged on the velvet couch, scrolling her phone. "You look tense," she purred. "Another bad day at the office?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his iPad and opened an article that made his stomach twist. Ethan Blackwell's secret weapon. Olivia Carter. The photo showed her standing beside Ethan at a charity gala, her hand on her stomach, glowing, elegant, untouchable. Ethan's gaze lingered on her with quiet admiration. "Is that your ex?" Chloe asked, leaning closer. "She looks different." "Don't," Liam snapped. "Relax," Chloe said, smirking. "It's just weird seeing you jealous. You traded her for me, remember?" He glared at her, but her words hit their mark. Jealousy raw, unfamiliar, and humiliating burned through him. He tossed the tablet aside and poured another drink. "She's not as happy as she looks," he muttered. But deep down, he wasn't sure if he believed it. Meanwhile, Olivia was thriving. With Ethan's mentorship, Lumalife launched its first digital wellness campaign, Light After the Storm. The campaign went viral, featuring stories of women overcoming heartbreak and rediscovering purpose. It wasn't just a business. It was healing, disguised as innovation. One afternoon, as she presented new concepts in the Blackwell boardroom, Ethan studied her quietly. "You know," he said afterward, "you've built something extraordinary. You should be proud." Olivia smiled, though her eyes shimmered. "I'm just trying to give back what I wish I'd had." He nodded. "Then you're doing exactly what you were meant to." That evening, as she left the office, she spotted a familiar car parked across the street, a black Mercedes S-Class. For a moment, her heart stopped. Through the tinted glass, she caught a glimpse of Liam's profile. He wasn't moving, just sitting, watching. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't let fear take root. She simply turned, hailed a cab, and left without looking back. The next day, gossip columns buzzed again. A leaked photo from the charity gala showed Olivia laughing beside Ethan, the headline bold, "Is Manhattan's most eligible billionaire in love?" Liam's fury was volcanic. At the office, he slammed his fist against the desk. "She's using him to get to me," he barked at his assistant. "It's all PR." But when he opened his inbox, a new message made his throat tighten. It was from one of Lumalife's partners, an invitation to collaborate. The signature line read, "Founder and CEO, Olivia Carter." For the first time, the man who once defined her future realized she now defined his. And as jealousy turned to obsession, Liam Hayes began plotting a return into Olivia's world, unaware that his intrusion would set off a chain of consequences even his power couldn't control. The illusion of perfection always cracks from the inside. For Chloe Monroe, the first fracture appeared on a rainy Thursday afternoon when her photo shoot for Vogue Living got cancelled at the last minute. The editor claimed creative direction issues, but Chloe knew the truth: her engagement numbers were dropping, and the internet had found a new darling to adore, Olivia Carter. Everywhere she looked, Olivia's face seemed to follow her. Billboards, interviews, podcasts, always calm, poised, radiant. The same woman Chloe had once mocked as the soft one was now being called an icon of reinvention. The comparison gnawed at her. That evening, she stormed into the penthouse, heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. "Liam," she snapped, tossing her designer bag onto the couch. "Do you know what people are saying about us online?" He didn't look up from his laptop. "Chloe, not now." "Not now?" she scoffed. "You mean while your ex-wife is trending, and I'm being called a homewrecker on Twitter?" Finally, Liam looked up, eyes cold. "You're overreacting." Olivia's old news. "She just has a billionaire backing her." That billionaire looks at her like she hung the stars." Chloe spat. "And you're sitting here pretending it doesn't bother you." He said nothing, which told her everything. For the first time, Chloe saw fear in him, not of losing her, but of losing control. Liam's empire was wobbling. Hayes Global's board had begun whispering about leadership changes. Their latest product had tanked. Investors were nervous. He needed good press. And she was supposed to be his asset, the beautiful distraction. Instead, she had become a liability. That night, while Liam worked in his office, Chloe scrolled through his email on his iPad. She told herself it was curiosity, but it was desperation. Buried between investor memos and PR reports was a thread titled, "Partnership Proposal, Lumalife." Her pulse raced as she read Olivia's name. The proposal wasn't just business, it was competition. Olivia's company was gaining traction, backed by Blackwell Capital. Chloe's stomach turned. She slammed the tablet down. "She's everywhere," she shouted. Liam rubbed his temples. You're losing it, Chloe. Losing it? She snapped. You're the one obsessed. You watch every interview, every photo, don't deny it. He glared. Be careful. Her laughter came out sharp and brittle. Careful. Please. You used me to feel powerful, and now that your ex is shining again, you can't stand it. He stood, voice low and dangerous. That's enough. But Chloe wasn't finished. You think you can control me like her? You can't. Because unlike Olivia, I'm not afraid to burn everything down. The argument ended with a slammed door and the sound of breaking glass. By morning, Chloe was gone, and so was Liam's peace. 2 days later, TMZ splashed a headline across the internet. Liam Hayes, model girlfriend, spotted leaving penthouse in tears. Paparazzi photos showed Chloe with red-rimmed eyes and a suitcase. Underneath, anonymous sources whispered that Liam had been emotionally distant and fixated on his ex-wife. For the first time, the public sympathy began to shift not toward the glamorous CEO or his young lover, but toward the woman who had once walked away with nothing, Olivia Carter. At the Blackwell Foundation, Olivia didn't gloat. She simply shook her head when an assistant mentioned the story. Let them have their noise, she said quietly. We have work to do. Ethan looked at her, impressed by her composure. You're handling this better than most would. Olivia smiled faintly. That's because I already lived through my worst day. This is just the echo. But outside that calm exterior, the world was watching, and in the ruins of his penthouse, Liam Hayes was realizing that his mistress's fall might just drag him down with her. And in the chaos she left behind, Chloe Monroe was about to make a decision that would ignite the scandal all over again. Only this time, Olivia wouldn't be the one humiliated. The night of the Blackwell Foundation's annual gala shimmered with gold and tension. The ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton Manhattan glowed beneath crystal chandeliers, every inch a portrait of wealth and influence. It was the kind of evening Olivia Carter once dreaded, where every smile hid a headline and every glance carried judgment. But tonight, she walked through the marble foyer with her head high, a vision of calm confidence in a midnight blue gown that hugged her gently rounded figure. 2 small children, her twins, now almost one, were at home with a trusted nanny, their laughter still echoing in her heart. It was her first night out in months, and Ethan Blackwell had insisted she attend. You've earned this, he'd said, offering his arm as they entered together. Cameras flashed, the light catching his tailored tuxedo and her soft, radiant smile. They looked like a story the city was waiting to tell. Inside, the air buzzed with champagne and whispered intrigue. Investors, artists, and politicians mingled beneath a string quartet's soothing notes. Olivia felt Ethan's quiet steadiness beside her, an anchor amid the swirl of glittering chaos. Relax, he said with a teasing grin. You belong here. I'm trying to remember that, she replied, her voice barely above the music. Across the ballroom, Liam Hayes froze mid-conversation when he saw her. For a moment, he thought the light was playing tricks, but no, it was her. Olivia. His Olivia. The woman he'd convinced himself had vanished from his world forever, now stood just yards away, her presence magnetic, her smile effortless. His companion, a corporate partner who didn't know his history, followed his gaze. Beautiful, isn't she? He said casually. That's Olivia Carter, founder of Luma Life. She's here with Ethan Blackwell. They say he's completely smitten. Liam's jaw tightened. He tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. I've heard of her. When their eyes met across the crowded room, the noise around them seemed to fade. Olivia didn't flinch. She didn't look away. Her calm, steady gaze was the mirror he had avoided for 2 years. Every ounce of arrogance he'd used to justify leaving her crumbled under the weight of her serenity. Ethan turned, noticing the shift in her expression. Everything all right? He asked gently. Olivia inhaled slowly. Just a ghost. Liam excused himself from his conversation, unable to resist the pull. The crowd parted almost poetically as he approached her. Olivia, he said, his voice lower than she remembered. She smiled politely. Liam, you look, he began. Alive? She finished softly. I am. Ethan stepped forward, offering his hand with quiet confidence. Ethan Blackwell. Liam hesitated, recognizing the name instantly. Of course. The 2 men shook hands, a brief exchange heavy with unspoken history. It's good to see you doing well, Liam said, trying to sound composed. Olivia nodded. You too. Then, turning to Ethan, she added, "We should greet the board members." 1. As they walked away, Liam stood rooted, watching her glide across the marble floor, graceful, untouchable. The room felt suddenly smaller. He caught fragments of gossip behind him. "She's incredible. Blackwell's lucky. What a comeback." When he looked down, he realized his hand was shaking. He tightened his grip around his champagne glass, but the chill in his chest wouldn't fade. Chloe's voice echoed in his memory, mocking and sharp. "You traded her for me, remember?" Across the ballroom, Olivia laughed softly at something Ethan whispered. Her eyes sparkled not with defiance, but peace. And that, more than anything, shattered Liam's pride. Later that night, he slipped out onto the terrace, needing air. Through the glass doors, he could still see her, radiant under the chandeliers, surrounded by people who truly saw her. For the first time in his life, Liam Hayes understood what it felt like to lose everything and realized the thing he'd thrown away was the only part of himself that had ever been real. And as the cold wind swept across the terrace, he vowed silently he would win her back, no matter what it cost. But what he didn't know was that the price would be far higher than he could ever afford. The night after the gala, Liam Hayes sat alone in his penthouse, the Manhattan skyline glittering beyond the glass like a cruel reminder of everything he used to own: power, control, and the woman who once made it all mean something. He loosened his tie, poured himself another glass of Macallan, and scrolled through the digital headlines lighting up his tablet. Olivia Carter and Ethan Blackwell steal the spotlight at the Ritz-Carlton Gala. Tree. From CEO's ex-wife to Manhattan's new power player. The words hit harder than whiskey. The accompanying photo showed Olivia laughing beside Ethan, one hand resting on his arm, the other clutching a champagne flute. The look in Ethan's eyes was unmistakable, protective, admiring, intimate. Liam zoomed in until the pixels blurred, hating how happy she looked. He tossed the tablet across the couch and ran a hand through his hair. "She's using him," he muttered to no one. "This is all PR." But deep down, he knew it wasn't. Ethan Blackwell didn't play at appearances. He invested in substance. And Olivia, for all her quiet strength, was real in a way no one else in Liam's life had ever been. Downstairs, the door opened with a sharp click. Chloe Monroe swept in, wearing a silver trench coat and oversized sunglasses even though it was nearly midnight. "You didn't answer my calls," she said, her voice edged with irritation. Liam didn't look up. "I didn't feel like it." "Howie." She rolled her eyes, dropping her designer purse onto the table. "Still sulking about your ex?" "God, Liam, it's pathetic. You left her, remember?" He glared at her, the tension crackling. "Don't start." Chloe smirked, walking closer. "You think she's some saint now, please. The only reason she's smiling is because Blackwell's bankrolling her little redemption tour. You really believe she cares about him?" He slammed his glass down, the amber liquid sloshing onto the marble. "Enough." "Shueda." Chloe flinched. "You're losing it." "Get out," he said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. She hesitated, searching his face. "You'll regret this, Liam." "I already do," he said coldly. The door slammed behind her, leaving silence heavy as smoke. Liam sank into his chair, the echo of her words haunting him. She's smiling because of Blackwell. The idea burned like acid. He couldn't bear the thought of another man doing what he had failed to, making Olivia feel safe, seen, cherished. The next morning, his assistant entered the office to find him already at his desk. Sleeves rolled up, eyes bloodshot. "Sir, you're 9 o'clock. Cancel everything," Liam snapped. "I need information on Lumalife. Funding sources, investors, everything." "Sir, that's..." "Just do it." Hours later, a report landed on his desk. He scanned it quickly, his pulse quickening. Lumalife had tripled in valuation over 6 months. Ethan's foundation wasn't just supporting Olivia, it was preparing for a merger that could make her one of the most influential voices in wellness tech. He leaned back in his chair, stunned. The woman he once dismissed as too soft had built an empire. And somehow, she had done it without him. That night, he found himself scrolling through her interviews again. Her voice was calm, her tone warm but firm. "Forgiveness," she said to one reporter, "isn't weakness. It's how you reclaim your power." He replayed the clip over and over, jaw tight. Forgiveness. Was that what she'd done? Moved on and erased him? He stood, staring out over Park Avenue as rain streaked the glass. Down below, the city pulsed with life cars, lights, people moving forward. And for the first time, Liam realized he wasn't moving at all. He turned away from the window, grabbed his phone, and typed out a message before he could stop himself. "We need to talk." But when he hovered over the send button, his thumb froze. What could he even say? That he missed her? That he'd made the biggest mistake of his life? He deleted the message and tossed the phone aside. The whiskey burned down his throat like penance. As thunder rumbled over the city, Liam Hayes swore he would find a way back into Olivia's world. But what began as jealousy was about to turn into an obsession that would destroy everything still holding him together. By early summer, the cracks in Hayes Global were no longer whispers, they were headlines. What had once been a towering symbol of innovation and luxury was now a bleeding empire, hemorrhaging trust, credibility, and billions in shareholder value. The man who once ruled the skyline now found himself trapped beneath it. The first blow came quietly. A leaked email thread between senior executives revealed internal conflict, reckless spending, and Liam Hayes' impulsive decision-making. The next came louder. A whistleblower report accusing the company of inflating profits to secure investor confidence. Within days, the SEC opened an investigation. Liam's phone rang nonstop: lawyers, journalists, board members, but he answered no one. Instead, he sat in his glass-walled office, overlooking Park Avenue, watching the storm gather. The same city that once applauded him now waited for his downfall like an audience craving blood. Chloe Monroe's betrayal was the final spark. After their explosive breakup, she sold her story to Vanity Fair. The headline read, "Behind the Mask of Power, Life with the Real Liam Hayes." The article painted him as controlling, paranoid, and emotionally abusive. She described their relationship as a masterclass in manipulation, claiming he'd destroyed not only her career but her confidence. The fallout was immediate. Luxury brands pulled their partnerships. Sponsors withdrew from Hayes Vision, the company's flagship product. Board members began meeting privately without him. And still, the press kept digging. One morning, a photo went viral, a paparazzi shot of Liam stumbling out of a restaurant, tie loosened, eyes bloodshot. The caption read, "Fallen CEO. From tech titan to tragic headline." Across town, Olivia Carter read the article in silence. Ethan Blackwell sat across from her at their office, sipping his espresso. "You've seen it?" he asked. She nodded, yes. Ethan's gaze was steady. "Do you feel sorry for him?" Olivia hesitated. "No," she said finally. "Just sad. He had everything, and he threw it all away. People who build on arrogance always collapse," Ethan said softly. "Gravity never forgets." Olivia smiled faintly at that. "I'm trying not to enjoy watching it happen." Ethan leaned forward. "You're not enjoying it, you're witnessing it. There's a difference." At Lumalife, the contrast couldn't have been sharper. Their latest app feature focused on mindfulness for single mothers had just hit 1 million downloads. Sponsors were calling daily. Olivia was becoming the face of modern resilience, and Forbes had already confirmed her spot on its Women of Impact list. Meanwhile, Liam's office grew emptier by the day. His assistant quit. His CFO resigned. His board called an emergency meeting that he wasn't invited to. The empire he'd built, the one that had cost him his marriage, was slipping through his fingers like sand. He tried calling Chloe, no answer. He even drafted a message to Olivia, but deleted it before finishing the first sentence. The shame was too heavy. Late one night, he sat alone in his penthouse, lights dim, surrounded by silence. The glass walls reflected a man he no longer recognized, unshaven, exhausted, haunted. The city that once roared his name now hummed indifferently below. He reached for the remote and turned on the TV. A business news anchor was discussing Hayes Global's potential bankruptcy. "The CEO has not made a public statement," the anchor said, "but insiders claim the company is in free fall." Then, the screen shifted to a smiling image of Olivia and Ethan at a recent conference. On a brighter note, the anchor continued, "Olivia Carter's Lumalife continues to rise, symbolizing strength and reinvention in the wellness tech space. 1. Liam's grip on the remote tightened until his knuckles whitened. The irony was merciless. Her rise was the mirror image of his fall. As the screen faded to black, he muttered to himself, "You win, Olivia." But even as the words left his lips, he knew he didn't mean them. He couldn't accept defeat, not yet. Because somewhere inside the ruins of his empire, a dangerous idea was beginning to form a plan to reclaim everything he'd lost, no matter who had to break for him to rise again. While Hayes Global crumbled under scandal, Lumalife bloomed like sunlight through the cracks. Within a year, Olivia Carter had transformed her pain into a purpose that captured hearts far beyond Manhattan. The brand's mantra, heal, rise, reclaim, appeared on subway posters, billboards along Fifth Avenue, and Instagram feeds from Los Angeles to London. What began as a quiet startup run from a shared workspace now occupied a sleek glass office in Soho, its minimalist design echoing calm confidence. The morning the Forbes Women of Impact issue hit stands, Olivia sat in her new office, the glossy magazine open on her desk. Her portrait filled the page, serene, powerful, unmistakably reborn. The headline read, "From Betrayal to Billion-Dollar Vision. How Olivia Carter Built Light Out of Darkness." 1. Ethan Blackwell stood by the window, the Manhattan skyline glowing behind him. "You've made it," he said simply. Olivia smiled. "We've made it." He shook his head. "No, Olivia. You did this." I only believed what was already there. Their eyes met steady, unspoken, electric. For months, they had worked side by side, early mornings, late nights, endless cups of coffee. Somewhere between strategy meetings and laughter-filled brainstorming sessions, a quiet bond had grown. It wasn't about rescue or gratitude anymore. It was about partnership. That evening, Lumalife hosted a gala at the Beverly Hills Hotel, their first West Coast expansion. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, silver accents, and an energy that buzzed with hope. Olivia's twins, now toddling, had accompanied her on the trip, cared for by a nanny during the event. She wore a simple white Dior gown, elegant yet understated, the kind of grace that commanded attention without demanding it. The audience was filled with celebrities, entrepreneurs, and investors. The kind of crowd that had once applauded Liam Hayes. But tonight, they applauded her. As Olivia stepped on stage, the applause swelled. Ethan watched from the front row, pride gleaming in his eyes. 2 years ago, she began, her voice steady. "I thought my story was over. I thought failure and heartbreak defined me. But sometimes, life breaks us open so light can get in." She paused, scanning the crowd. Lumalife isn't just a company. It's proof that no woman is finished just because someone stopped believing in her. The crowd rose to its feet, the applause thunderous. Meanwhile, across the country in New York, Liam Hayes sat in a dimly lit bar watching the live broadcast of the gala on a mounted television. The camera zoomed in on Olivia's radiant smile, the audience's standing ovation, and Ethan joining her on stage to present a check for $5 million to women's wellness initiatives. Liam gripped his glass, jaw tightening. Around him, patrons were whispering, "That's her, right? The one who used to be married to that CEO? She's amazing." He couldn't look away. The woman who had once wept in his shadow now stood taller than he ever had. His reflection in the bar mirror looked older, smaller. The whiskey burned going down. Back in Beverly Hills, the gala ended with music and laughter spilling into the courtyard. Olivia stepped outside for air. Ethan followed, handing her a flute of champagne. "To the light," he said softly. "To the light," she echoed, clinking her glass. The city shimmered around them, the night warm and alive. For a moment, everything felt complete, until a faint vibration broke the stillness. Her phone buzzed. She frowned. The screen flashed with a name she hadn't seen in months. Liam Hayes. Ethan noticed the change in her expression. "Everything all right?" She locked the phone, forcing a small smile. "Just the past trying to call." He studied her quietly. "Do you want to answer?" Olivia shook her head. "No. I'm done living backward." She didn't know that across the country, Liam wasn't just calling out of nostalgia. He was planning his next move, one that would drag both their worlds back into collision. And for the first time since losing her, Liam Hayes wasn't chasing love. He was chasing redemption, and he didn't care who got hurt along the way. The first time Liam Hayes saw Olivia again after her Forbes feature, the world was still pretending his empire hadn't collapsed. He'd spent months clawing at the remnants of Hayes Global, trying to convince investors that he could rebuild, that the headlines were exaggerated. But behind closed doors, his offices were empty, and his name had become synonymous with failure. His penthouse, once a symbol of untouchable success, felt more like a museum of regret. One night, after too much whiskey and silence, Liam scrolled through his phone. Every image of Olivia seemed to mock him. Her at charity events, smiling beside Ethan Blackwell, her on a morning show, speaking softly about healing and empowerment. He could barely stand it anymore. Finally, against every ounce of pride he had left, he drafted a message. "I owe you an apology. I'd like to see you just to talk." He read it 10 times before pressing send. For 3 days, there was no reply. Then, on the 4th morning, his phone buzzed. It was from an unknown number. "Tomorrow, 6 p.m. Blackwell Center rooftop." When he arrived, the sky over Manhattan was streaked in orange and violet. The rooftop garden of the Blackwell Center was serene, lined with fairy lights and white orchids. Olivia stood near the edge, wearing a cream blazer and jeans, her hair gently tousled by the wind. She turned as he approached, her expression unreadable. "Liam," she said simply. He tried to smile. "You look different." "I am different," she replied. "You said you wanted to talk. Say it." He hesitated, his throat tight. "I was wrong, about everything. I thought success meant control. I thought love was something I could replace." Her eyes flickered with a mixture of pity and distance. "And now I see what I lost," he admitted, stepping closer. "You were the best part of me, Olivia. I just didn't realize it until you were gone." Sen. The honesty in his voice startled her, but not enough to undo what had been done. She crossed her arms, her voice calm but firm. "You didn't lose me, Liam. You threw me away. And when people throw things away, they don't get to ask for them back when they realize they were valuable." He flinched as if struck. "I deserve that. But I'm not here to take anything. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry." She studied him for a long moment. There was a time she would have given anything to hear those words. But now, they felt like closing credits to a film she no longer needed to rewatch. "I accept your apology," she said finally. "But forgiveness doesn't mean access." He swallowed hard. "So, this is it? This is closure," she replied gently. "You and I were both free now." As she turned to leave, he reached out, desperation cracking through his composure. "Olivia, please. I've changed. I could help you invest in Dine." She stopped mid-step, her voice suddenly sharp. "Don't insult me with money, Liam. That's all you ever knew how to offer." Her words hung in the air, cold and final. Then she was gone, the elevator doors closing with a soft chime. Liam stayed there long after she left, the city lights flickering beneath him like judgment. For the first time, he realized that no amount of wealth or redemption could rebuild what he had destroyed. Downstairs, Ethan was waiting by the lobby entrance. Olivia walked past him, her expression composed but distant. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. He simply placed a reassuring hand on her back as they stepped into the night. Above them, on the rooftop, Liam stared out at the skyline, his empire in ashes, his future uncertain, his past finally speaking back. And though Olivia had walked away for good, Liam Hayes couldn't shake the haunting truth. For the first time in years, he finally felt the full weight of everything he had lost, and it was unbearable. The apology meeting should have closed a chapter, but instead, it cracked open another storm. Within a week, Manhattan's gossip columns were once again on fire this time, not because of Olivia Carter's rise, but because of Chloe Monroe's revenge. The headlines exploded across every feed. Model Chloe Monroe drops bombshell tell-all. Life with CEO Liam Hayes. Cheating, lies, and corporate secrets. Inside the empire that fell apart. Olivia first saw it while waiting in line at a Starbucks on Fifth Avenue. The magazine cover glared at her from a newsstand. Chloe's flawless face, eyes red as if from tears, framed by the words, "He used us both." Her stomach tightened. She didn't need to read it to know what it contained: humiliation, sensationalism, and maybe, finally, the truth. But when she flipped through the article, it was worse than she imagined. Chloe didn't just expose Liam's personal betrayals. She detailed his corporate corruption emails, secret accounts, shady investors. There were screenshots, photographs, even a recording of one of their private arguments. She painted him as a manipulative tyrant and ended the piece with a pointed quote. He destroyed one woman's life to build his empire. Then he tried to destroy mine. Now, I'm done being silent. By the next morning, Hayes Global shares had dropped another 30%. The SEC announced formal charges. Liam's attorneys resigned. His name trended for all the wrong reasons. At the Lumalife office, Ethan placed a copy of the article on Olivia's desk. She just threw gasoline on his grave, he said quietly. Olivia skimmed the pages, her expression unreadable. It's brutal, she murmured. Do you think she's telling the truth? Ethan asked. Olivia nodded slowly. Most of it. The rest, she's spinning for sympathy. But either way, it's over for him. Across town, it was chaos. Liam's penthouse was surrounded by paparazzi. He hadn't slept in days. Every channel, every website, every voice in the city seemed to chant his name like a curse. He threw his phone across the room, shattering it against the wall. She used me, he snarled, pacing. She used me, and now she's using my ruin to sell magazines. His assistant, the last one still loyal, kept her distance. Sir, Vanity Fair has requested a statement. They're running a follow-up. Statement? He barked. What do they want me to say? That I'm sorry again? That I deserved it? He laughed bitterly. I've already lost everything. Son. That night, the television blared with Chloe's exclusive interview. She wore white, her voice trembling just enough to sound believable. I didn't want to hurt anyone, she said tearfully. But I couldn't let him get away with what he did to Olivia or to me. The public devoured it. For the first time, sympathy turned toward the women. Meanwhile, Olivia sat on her balcony, the twins asleep inside, the city lights glittering below. Ethan joined her, holding 2 mugs of tea. It's strange, he said softly. Watching the past eat itself alive. She nodded. I used to dream about his downfall, she admitted. I thought it would feel like victory. But now, it just feels sad. Ethan studied her profile, the strength, the grace. You've outgrown revenge, he said. That's why you're winning. She smiled faintly. Maybe. But sometimes, I still wonder how it all went so wrong. He reached for her hand, his touch grounding. Because you loved someone who didn't know what love was. But that's not your shame, it's his. Across the city, Liam watched Chloe's interview replay for the 10th time. Each lie twisted deeper. Each truth cut sharper. He looked at his reflection in the darkened TV screen, a man stripped of everything but guilt. And somewhere deep in that emptiness, a thought began to take root. If he couldn't rebuild his empire, maybe he could rebuild himself by facing the one person whose forgiveness still haunted him like unfinished business. The autumn air carried the scent of rain and nostalgia when Olivia Carter stood before the glass doors of the penthouse she had once called home. The building still towered above Central Park like a monument to ambition, its marble lobby gleaming under soft golden light. She hadn't been back since the divorce the last time she'd walked out those doors. It had been with trembling hands, a broken heart, and a single suitcase. Now, years later, the doorman blinked in surprise when she appeared. Miss Carter? He asked uncertainly. She smiled gently. It's Mrs. Carter once upon a time. He hesitated, then nodded. The apartment's for sale. Would you like to go up? I would, she said softly. Just for a moment. Show. The elevator ride felt endless, every floor a ghost of memory. When the doors slid open, the penthouse greeted her like a forgotten chapter. The scent of cedar and cologne lingered faintly, though the furniture was gone. Empty rooms echoed with the faint hum of the city below. She stepped inside, her heels clicking on the polished floor, her reflection flickering in the tall glass windows. This was where she had once believed forever lived. She could still see it, the warm glow of the fireplace, Liam's laughter echoing down the hall, the scent of morning coffee, the sound of whispered dreams. But now, it was all hollow space. She walked slowly toward the master bedroom. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, bathing the room in gold. For a moment, she closed her eyes and let herself remember. The day she first moved in, the night she found Liam's messages to Chloe, the morning she packed her bags in silence. It felt like another lifetime. In the center of the room, a small vase sat on a shelf, a leftover staging piece from the realtor, a single white rose inside. She smiled faintly, taking it as a sign. She pulled a folded note from her bag and placed it beside the vase. In neat handwriting, it read, "Thank you for the lessons, not the pain." As she turned to leave, she heard footsteps behind her. Her heart skipped. When she looked back, Liam stood in the doorway. He looked nothing like the man she once knew. His tailored suits were gone. His eyes were tired, his posture slouched under invisible weight. "You're here," he said softly, as though afraid she might vanish if he spoke too loudly. "I didn't think anyone would be," she replied. "I just wanted to see it one last time." He nodded, his gaze drifting around the empty room. "It doesn't feel like home anymore." "It stopped being home when love left," she said. He took a hesitant step closer. "You look happy, Olivia." "Genuinely happy." "I am," she admitted. "And I hope someday you can be too." He swallowed hard. "You really forgive me?" She met his eyes. "Forgiveness isn't about you, Liam. It's about me finally letting go of everything you took." For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he smiled weakly, something almost human flickering through the remorse. "You always were stronger than I deserved." Olivia turned toward the door. "Goodbye, Liam." Lol. When she stepped into the hallway, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. As she descended, she felt lighter, as though leaving behind the last trace of her old life. Back on the street, she glanced up at the penthouse one final time. The windows shimmered in the afternoon light. She whispered, "Goodbye, ghosts," and hailed a cab. The driver asked, "Where to?" She smiled. "Home." As the cab pulled away, the skyline blurred into motion. Inside that empty penthouse, Liam stood alone, holding the note she'd left behind. For the first time in years, he felt something pure grief. Yes, but also clarity, because sometimes losing everything isn't punishment. It's the only way to understand what love was supposed to mean. The rain had finally stopped when Ethan Blackwell showed up at Olivia Carter's brownstone one quiet Sunday evening. The city outside was wrapped in mist, the kind that blurred streetlights into golden halos. Inside, the scent of cinnamon tea filled the living room, and soft jazz played from her speaker. The twins were asleep upstairs, their tiny breaths the heartbeat of her new life. Olivia opened the door, surprised. "Ethan? It's late. Is everything all right?" He smiled faintly, holding up a paper bag. "I brought dinner. Thought you might need company." She hesitated only a second before stepping aside. "You're lucky I just made tea." "Probably." They sat by the window overlooking the wet street, eating takeout from his favorite Thai place. The conversation was light at first work, the twins, the upcoming Lumalife retreat in Napa. But there was something in Ethan's eyes, something quieter and heavier, that made Olivia's pulse quicken. Finally, she set her cup down. "You didn't come here to talk about work, did you?" Ethan leaned back, his gaze drifting toward the rain-slicked glass. "No, not really." He exhaled slowly. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you." Her brow furrowed. "What is it?" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Do you remember the Bright Futures Gala? The one 7 years ago, where you handled the PR?" "Of course," she said. "That was the night Liam met half his investors." He nodded. "That's also the night I met you." Olivia blinked, unsure where he was going. "We barely spoke. You were surrounded by reporters. I noticed you," he said simply, "not in the way men notice women. You were different. Everyone in that room was trying to impress someone. You were trying to make the night work. You had this calm energy that—" He stopped, smiling at himself. "It stayed with me." She felt her chest tighten, unsure what to say. "Ethan, I followed your work after that," he continued, his voice soft but steady. "Not obsessively, just quietly. Every press campaign, every success. And then, when the divorce hit the news, I wanted to reach out, but I didn't want to be another man offering pity." Her throat went dry. "So you hired me?" He shook his head. "No. I invited you to partner. There's a difference. You didn't need saving, Olivia. You needed someone to remind you you still had power. Silence hung between them, thick with things unsaid. Outside, thunder murmured somewhere over the Hudson. Olivia's fingers brushed the edge of her cup. Why tell me this now? Because, he said quietly, I'm running out of ways to pretend I don't care. Her breath caught. The confession hung in the air, fragile and impossible to ignore. Ethan, she said softly, you've been my anchor, my friend. But I'm still learning how to breathe again. I can't promise anything more than that. He nodded, his expression warm, patient. I'm not asking for promises. Just honesty. That's enough. The room fell still. She looked at him, the man who had seen her broken and never once tried to fix her. For years, she had believed love had to hurt to be real. But here he was, showing her it could be quiet, steady, and kind. She smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. Then honesty is what you'll have. He returned her smile, something tender in his eyes. That's all I need. Outside, the rain began again, soft and rhythmic. Olivia leaned her head against the window, listening. For the first time in a long while, the sound didn't feel like sorrow, it felt like renewal. Upstairs, one of the twins stirred, letting out a sleepy sigh. Ethan rose, his movements gentle. I should go, he said. Olivia walked him to the door. As he stepped into the night, he turned back once. You really don't know how extraordinary you are, do you? She laughed softly. Maybe someday I'll believe it. Woo. But as the door closed behind him, she felt something bloom quietly inside her. Not love yet, but the terrifying, beautiful possibility of it. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Olivia Carter's brownstone, painting soft gold across the wooden floor. The twins Noah and Grace were giggling on the rug, surrounded by building blocks and half-eaten strawberries. Their laughter was the kind of sound that made the world seem simple again, as if heartbreak had never existed. Olivia sat cross-legged beside them, her hair loose, coffee steaming in her hand. It was one of those rare, quiet mornings when the air itself felt gentle. For once, she wasn't thinking about deadlines, press releases, or meetings with investors. She was just a mother barefoot, happy, whole. Ethan Blackwell had spent the weekend at her place, helping assemble a small swing set in the backyard. Now he sat by the window, a copy of Women Who Run with the Wolves open on his lap, his reading glasses sliding down his nose. You know, he said without looking up, I think Noah's about to beat his sister to walking. Olivia smiled. You've been saying that for a week. Call it a hunch, he replied, closing the book and joining the twins on the rug. Come on, buddy, show us what you've got. Noah stared at him, wobbling on his chubby legs, his little fists clenched for balance. Grace squealed, clapping her hands as if cheering him on. Ethan stretched his arms out. Come on, little man. Just one step. Noah hesitated, swayed, and then, to everyone's astonishment, took 2 tiny steps forward before collapsing into Ethan's arms. Olivia gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. He did it. Ethan laughed, lifting the boy high into the air. You're a natural. Jong too. Grace, not to be outdone, scrambled up and tried to copy her brother, managing half a step before tumbling onto her blanket. Olivia reached for her, laughing until tears filled her eyes. For a moment, the room was full of the kind of joy that doesn't ask for permission, it just blooms. Ethan watched her quietly, memorizing the sight. Olivia's laughter, sunlight tangled in her hair, the twins clinging to her dress. He had seen her at her lowest, shattered and unsure. But this was who she was meant to be. After lunch, they moved outside to the small backyard. The swing set stood proudly beneath a tree, ribbons of autumn light flickering through the leaves. Ethan brewed coffee while Olivia spread out a blanket. The twins crawled between them, playing with fallen leaves. Do you ever miss it? He asked suddenly. She looked up. Miss what? The old life. The power, the events, the spotlight. Olivia smiled faintly. I thought I would. But now I realize I only miss the illusion of control. I used to chase success because I thought it meant safety. Now, I just want peace. Ethan nodded. And you've built it beautifully. She met his eyes. You helped me find it. He chuckled softly. All I did was hold the flashlight. You did the walking. They fell into comfortable silence, watching as Noah and Grace babbled to each other in their secret baby language. Then, Olivia spoke again, her tone more thoughtful. "You know, sometimes I think about how everything fell apart, and I realize it had to. If Liam hadn't left, I might never have found myself." Ethan smiled. Life has a cruel way of giving us exactly what we need, even when it feels like punishment. Olivia turned her face toward the sunlight. "Maybe that's the point of all of it, to be broken open just enough to let the light in." The words hung in the air, gentle and profound. The twins laughed again, chasing each other clumsily across the grass. Ethan leaned back on his elbows, watching them. "You're good with them," Olivia said, her voice soft. He grinned. "Maybe I'm just good with you." Her cheeks flushed. "Careful, Ethan. That almost sounded like flirting." "Almost?" he teased. They shared a quiet laugh, the kind that carried promise without pressure. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Olivia gathered her children into her arms, her heart impossibly full. The pain, the loss, the betrayal, all of it had brought her here, to this peace, this warmth, this life she had rebuilt from ashes. And while she didn't say it out loud, she knew it in her bones. The next time she fell in love, it wouldn't be a rescue, it would be a choice. The morning the world officially declared Liam Hayes bankrupt, Manhattan was drenched in rain. Reporters stood outside his former headquarters, umbrellas clashing like armor, their voices cutting through the storm. Hayes Global files for liquidation. Former tech CEO under investigation for securities fraud. The empire that once symbolized power and perfection had fallen to ash. Inside his penthouse, now stripped of staff, artwork, and warmth, Liam sat alone at the grand piano that no one ever played. The silence was suffocating. A single eviction notice lay on the marble counter beside a stack of unopened mail. The whiskey bottle was nearly empty. His reflection in the window, a ghost of the man who had once controlled the skyline. He picked up the newspaper, the headline mocking him, "The Rise of Lumalife. Olivia Carter crowned the new face of modern wellness." The photo showed her standing beside Ethan Blackwell at an awards gala, radiant in emerald green, confidence glowing in every line of her body. She looked alive. He looked forgotten. Liam tossed the paper aside and laughed bitterly. "Of course," he muttered. "She gets the light. I get the storm." His phone buzzed, a rare sound these days. It was his mother, calling from Boston. He stared at the screen for a long time before silencing it. He couldn't face anyone who remembered the version of him that once made her proud. Across town, Olivia Carter's morning was entirely different. She was preparing for her keynote speech at a Forbes Women in Business Summit, her assistants bustling around her with schedules and notes. Ethan appeared at the door, holding 2 Starbucks coffees. "You ready to make them cry again?" he teased. She smiled. "I'm ready to make them believe again." On stage later that day, she spoke not about success, but about loss, the kind that strips you bare enough to rebuild honestly. "When life takes everything from you," she told the packed room, "it isn't punishment. It's an invitation to start over on your terms." The audience erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. She was no longer someone's ex-wife. She was a woman defined by her own light. Back in his dark penthouse, Liam flipped through TV channels until her voice filled the room. There she was, graceful, magnetic, everything he had once overlooked. He couldn't tear his eyes away. When she smiled, it wasn't just charisma, it was peace. "She's happier without me," he whispered. The realization hit harder than any scandal. He poured another drink, but even the burn of liquor couldn't dull the ache. By nightfall, he wandered into his office, now nearly empty. The shelves that once displayed awards and framed magazine covers stood bare. On the wall, the faint outline of where his company's logo had been was still visible, a ghost of glory. He sat at his desk and opened his laptop. The background photo hadn't changed in years. Olivia laughing in the kitchen, flour on her cheek, her hands covered in cookie dough. It was the last photo he'd taken before everything fell apart. His chest tightened. "I could have loved you better," he whispered. The next day, a charity gala took place at the Plaza, the same ballroom where his downfall had begun. Olivia arrived in a silver gown, her twins at home, her heart steady. As she greeted guests, someone whispered that Liam Hayes had been spotted leaving Manhattan for Boston, selling off his last assets. She nodded, expression calm. Then maybe he's finally found peace, she said. Outside the city, Liam's car sped along the highway, rain streaking the windshield. For once, there were no cameras, no crowds, just silence and the hum of regret. He thought of Olivia's words from that speech, the one he'd replayed a dozen times. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's freedom. He exhaled shakily, gripping the wheel. Maybe, he said to the empty car. It's time I forgive myself. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like fighting the fall. The skyline faded behind him. But somehow, it didn't look like loss anymore. It looked like the first hint of redemption. And while Olivia's light filled the city he left behind, Liam Hayes finally began the quiet, humbling journey of becoming human again. The Forbes Women in Business Summit had ended weeks ago, but Olivia Carter's words still echoed across boardrooms and coffee shops, from New York to San Francisco. Her speech, raw, simple, and powerful, had become the anthem of a generation of women who'd been told they couldn't rise after ruin. Lumalife's membership had tripled. Her inbox overflowed with letters from women who said she'd saved their lives without ever meeting them. One crisp November morning, Olivia sat in her Soho office reviewing a new partnership contract when her assistant entered with a bouquet of white lilies. "These just arrived for you," she said, placing the flowers on the desk. There was no card, just a single folded note tucked between the stems. Olivia hesitated, then opened it. "Thank you for proving me wrong. L.H." For a moment, she just stared. The initials hit like a whisper from a long-forgotten dream. She didn't know whether to feel anger or peace. But as she read the words again, she felt something unexpected closure. Liam Hayes wasn't haunting her anymore. He was acknowledging her. That afternoon, she spoke at Columbia University's School of Business, addressing a hall filled with young women eager to build their futures. "Success," she told them, "isn't about who believes in you. It's about what you do when no one does." The applause was thunderous. Afterward, several students came up in tears, thanking her. Olivia realized she was finally living her purpose, not just surviving her past. Later that evening, she and Ethan Blackwell took a walk through Central Park. The trees were aflame with autumn colors, the air crisp enough to see their breath. The twins were with their nanny, leaving her a rare hour of quiet. "Busy day?" Ethan asked, handing her a cup of hot chocolate. "Always," she laughed. "But a good kind of busy." He nodded. "I saw the lilies on your desk." She glanced at him, amused. "You really do notice everything. I just like knowing when someone sends flowers to the woman I care about," he said lightly, but his tone carried more weight than the words suggested. Olivia smiled softly. They were from Liam. "A thank you, I think. Or maybe a goodbye." Ethan stopped walking. "And how did that feel?" She took a deep breath. "Strangely freeing. For a long time, I thought forgiveness meant weakness. But now I see it's the opposite. It's choosing not to let pain define you." He studied her for a moment. "You've come a long way, Olivia Carter." She looked up at him, her eyes glimmering under the lamplight. "We both have." They walked in silence for a while, the sound of leaves crunching underfoot. Somewhere nearby, a street musician played a slow, soulful tune on a saxophone. The city lights shimmered on the water, reflections rippling like memories that had finally settled. Ethan broke the silence first. "You know, when I first asked you to join the foundation, I didn't imagine this." "This?" she asked, smiling. "This us," he said quietly. "You, rebuilding from ashes. Me, finding something worth protecting." She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "Maybe that's what healing looks like, becoming someone capable of loving again." He reached for her hand, fingers intertwining with hers. "Does that mean you're ready?" Olivia turned to face him fully. The skyline sparkled behind him, the hum of the city fading into a gentle hush. "I think I am," she said. The words hung between them like a promise. No grand declarations, no dramatic music, just two people who had walked through fire and found warmth on the other side. As they continued their walk, snow began to fall, soft and slow. Olivia looked up, catching a flake on her palm. "Full circle," she murmured. Ethan smiled. "No, just the beginning." She leaned her head against his shoulder, watching the city that had once broken her heart shine brighter than ever. And for the first time since that terrible night at the plaza, Olivia Carter felt completely whole, not because she had conquered her past, but because she had finally made peace with it. The morning sun crept gently through the curtains of Olivia Carter's Hamptons home, spilling warmth across the hardwood floors. Outside, the ocean murmured softly against the shore, its steady rhythm matching the heartbeat of a life rebuilt. It had been 3 years since her world fell apart, and now it felt almost poetic how peaceful it had become. The twins Noah and Grace were chasing each other through the backyard, their laughter echoing between the waves and the white fences. Ethan Blackwell stood by the kitchen island, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He still insisted on brewing it himself every morning, claiming that it was his way of earning his keep. Olivia entered the room barefoot, wearing one of his shirts, her hair tousled by the sea breeze. "You're up early," she said, smiling. He grinned. "The kids demanded pancakes at sunrise. I caved." She laughed softly, the sound of it light and effortless. The woman who once cried herself to sleep in a tiny Brooklyn apartment now radiated the kind of joy that couldn't be faked. She leaned against the counter, watching him pour syrup for the twins. "You know," she said, "if someone told me 5 years ago I'd be here happy, free, loved, I would have laughed." Ethan looked at her over his cup. "Maybe that's the point. The things we never see coming are the ones that save us." Later that afternoon, Olivia stood on the terrace overlooking the water, preparing for her final interview for a documentary about Luma life. The production team set up cameras while the crew adjusted lighting. She looked composed, serene, but her hands trembled slightly when the director said, "We'll begin with the question everyone's been waiting for. What would you say to the woman you were before it all began?" Olivia took a long breath, her eyes glistening. "I'd tell her not to be afraid of breaking," she said softly. "Because sometimes, that's the only way light can enter." She paused, smiling faintly. "I'd tell her that love doesn't live in grand promises or perfect pictures. It lives in quiet mornings, in laughter, in starting over even when you're scared. And I'd tell her she's stronger than she ever imagined." When the cameras cut, the crew fell silent. Some were wiping tears. Olivia turned toward the ocean, letting the wind carry away the last of her past. That evening, a celebration dinner filled the backyard with music and laughter. Friends, colleagues, and family gathered under strings of glowing lanterns. The twins danced barefoot on the grass, while Ethan stood beside her, a hand resting lightly on her back. As the night deepened, he led her down toward the beach. The moonlight shimmered across the waves, and for a moment, it felt as if the world had paused just for them. "I have one last question," Ethan said, reaching into his jacket pocket. Olivia turned, her breath catching as he opened a small velvet box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring platinum with a single diamond that gleamed like a drop of morning dew. "Olivia Carter," he said, his voice steady but soft. "You've built a life of light and strength. I don't want to save you, I just want to walk beside you while you keep shining. Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes, but her smile was radiant. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes." Ethan slid the ring onto her finger as the sound of the ocean swelled behind them. The twins, still awake, clapped and cheered from the deck, unaware that they were watching the final chapter of one story and the beginning of another. Olivia leaned into him, her voice barely audible against his chest. "We made it." He kissed her forehead. "You did," he said. "You turned pain into something beautiful." She looked up at the stars, her heart light. For the first time in her life, there was no anger, no ache, no fear, only gratitude. And as the waves kissed the shore beneath a silver moon, Olivia Carter realized she had finally come home, not to a place, but to herself. Trolvi, T contentri, uvu connach ldn. So, that's how the story ends. Hey, my amazing friends, you're still here, aren't you? If you've made it all the way to this moment, it means something in Lila's story has touched you in a way words can't quite describe. Maybe you've been where she was hurt, forgotten, trying to stand tall in a world that didn't believe in you. But here's the truth. Healing isn't about winning, it's about becoming. As Marcus Aurelius once said, "The obstacle is the way." Everything that tried to break, you can be the very thing that shapes your strength. Lila found peace not when she got revenge, but when she forgave, rebuilt, and chose love over bitterness. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. Don't let pain harden you. Let it refine you. So if you're still standing after everything life's thrown your way, know this, you're already stronger than you think. You're already becoming the person you were meant to be. If this story reached you, give it a like, share it with someone who needs a little hope tonight, and don't forget to subscribe. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we heal through them, together.
Unaware his wife was the multi-billionaire who bought the very company his parents worked for, he signed the divorce papers with a smug grin, believing he had finally escaped the ordinary woman who'd once lived in his shadow. He emptied their $100 million joint account to fund a lavish new life with his mistress, boasting that he'd traded up. But he had no idea the woman he abandoned owned everything he touched, from his parents' paychecks to the mansion he planned to keep. She watched silently as he celebrated his betrayal, her silence richer than revenge, her power hidden behind the calm in her eyes. When she finally moved, everything he called his vanished. But who exactly was the woman he underestimated? How did she build an empire so vast it swallowed his entire world? And why did her revenge leave not just him, but everyone he loved homeless? He didn't look back when he threw her out of the penthouse that evening. The slam of the door was final, deliberate, the punctuation mark on years of subtle disdain. He stood tall, proud in his designer suit, the kind she used to iron for him before board meetings, before love became an afterthought buried beneath ambition. She stood motionless in the hallway, the city lights from the glass elevator flickering across her tear-streaked face. But the tears weren't weakness. They were the final echo of a role she was done playing. When he drove away, she didn't chase. She didn't scream. She simply stood there, barefoot on marble, her breath calm, her mind precise. The silence that followed wasn't defeat. It was transformation, somewhere between heartbreak and revelation. Something ancient and powerful in her awakened. The quiet part of her that had built empires while pretending to be small. The invisible heiress finally stepped into her own reflection. Inside the penthouse, her absence was immediate, like the air had been sucked out. His mistress laughed too loud, poured champagne on the white rug, and whispered about renovations. He called her baby in the same tone he once reserved for his wife. But unlike the woman he'd discarded, this one didn't understand the architecture of wealth or the discipline of silence. She understood only the surface, the shimmer without the depth. And that, he thought, was enough. He didn't notice that the chauffeur who drove them that night was hers, that the penthouse lease he believed was his signature on bore her company's logo, that even the credit card he used to celebrate his freedom was linked to an account she allowed him to manage for appearance's sake. He believed in his own narrative, self-made, deserving, unstoppable. In the quiet of her new apartment, one she owned through a shell company she'd established years before, she sat on the edge of the bed and opened a small box. Inside were photographs from a past life, her grandfather smiling beside her as a teenager, his wrinkled hands resting over hers as he'd handed her the letter that changed everything. Power, he'd written, is most honestly revealed when hidden. Learn who loves you when you appear powerless. She had inherited a conglomerate the world envied, a labyrinth of holdings across tech, finance, and real estate. But her grandfather's will had demanded anonymity, no titles, no publicity, no inheritance disclosure for 5 years. Only after that could she publicly step into her role. And so she lived quietly, married the man she believed in, supported his dreams, and built his success brick by brick, testing not just him, but herself. At first he was humble, ambitious but grateful. He used to wake her with coffee, whispering dreams of building something meaningful together. They'd spend nights on their balcony, watching the skyline shimmer while talking about a future bigger than them both. But somewhere along the line, ambition mutated into entitlement. He stopped saying we and started saying I. He forgot that her quiet funding, her unseen calls, and her subtle influence within the company's boardrooms were the wind beneath his so-called rise. She remembered the night it shifted completely. He came home late, the scent of another woman faintly on his jacket. When she confronted him, he laughed, not out of guilt, but arrogance. "You wouldn't understand," he'd said, sipping scotch. "You've never had to fight for anything." The words landed like glass splintering in her chest. He didn't know. He couldn't know. She was the fight, the architect of every door he walked through, believing he'd opened it himself. She had kept the facade alive because of love, because she wanted to believe that the test her grandfather left her could end differently, that love could survive the illusion. But that illusion cracked the moment she found the photographs. Him and the mistress, celebrating with champagne paid for by her own company. That night she didn't cry. She called her lawyer instead, then her assistant, then her chief financial officer. Orders went out quietly. Transfers were made. Accounts were secured. The machine she'd built under the surface began to move. Quiet, precise, unstoppable. By the time dawn arrived, her decision was made. The test was over. He had failed, not just as a husband, but as a man incapable of recognizing the foundation he stood upon. When he told her to get out, she simply looked at him with a calm that unnerved him. "You're right," she said softly. "You need space to see what you really own." He laughed, mistaking her tone for surrender. But she wasn't leaving defeated. She was leaving to reclaim everything that was already hers. That night, as the city hummed below her window, she whispered to herself, not in sorrow but in certainty. "He thinks he's free," she said, "but I built the ground he walks on." And in that whisper, her revenge began. Not loud, not bitter, but inevitable. He woke up the next morning in a suite that wasn't his, sunlight cutting through sheer curtains like judgment. The scent of perfume lingered, expensive, sweet, and cloying. His mistress lay beside him, hair sprawled across white sheets, smiling as though the world finally belonged to them. He smiled back, masking the unease that fluttered under his chest. Today was supposed to be his day. Promotion, control, power. The CEO was retiring, and he, the self-proclaimed visionary, was stepping into the light. He didn't know that the light he basked in came from the woman he just cast into darkness. In the mirror, he admired himself. The crisp navy suit, the gold tie clip she had once gifted him. Back when her gift still meant something. He tightened it, not realizing he was adorning himself with the symbol of his undoing. His phone buzzed with messages, congratulations, anticipation, whispers of success. Even his parents texted him, proud of the son who'd made it. They had no idea that their pensions, their very livelihoods, were tied to her company's stocks. At the same hour across the city, she stood before a wall of glass overlooking Manhattan. The morning sun reflected off the skyline, and in that reflection she saw both the woman she had been and the woman she was becoming, calm, deliberate, untouchable. Her assistant waited silently behind her, holding a folder sealed in black leather. "Are the documents ready?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," the assistant replied. "The board will meet at 10. He believes it's for his promotion." She nodded once. "Then let's give him the stage." She turned back to the window, eyes sharp as diamond edges. For years, she'd watched him chase titles, build connections, and craft a persona that looked self-made, but was stitched together by her influence. Every board recommendation, every investment, every door that had opened for him, her quiet approval had made it possible. But he had mistaken support for submission, love for dependence. Today, he'd learned the difference. Her phone buzzed, a private message from her CFO. "All accounts secured, transfers complete. He no longer has access." The first piece of his illusion had just evaporated. Meanwhile, in the company's grand lobby, he strutted through the revolving doors, soaking in the admiring glances from employees. The marble floor gleamed, the logo of the conglomerate he thought he'd helped build shining beneath his polished shoes. He greeted the receptionist with charm, shook hands with department heads, exuding the kind of arrogance that comes before the fall. His mistress followed closely, dressed in a red dress too bold for the corporate world, her smile too wide. "You look powerful today," she purred. "I am powerful," he said, his grin cutting wide. "By noon, I'll be in charge." But as the elevator ascended, a flicker of something, call it instinct, call it dread, tightened in his chest. A whisper of her voice echoed in his mind. "You need space to see what you really own." He brushed it off with a smirk. She was probably crying somewhere, he thought, realizing what she'd lost. The conference room was a cathedral of wealth, floor-to-ceiling windows, a massive oak table, and the city sprawling like an empire below. The board members were already seated, eyes sharp, faces unreadable. He took his place near the head, his confidence swelling. The chairman cleared his throat. "We have a few final remarks before the transition," the chairman began. "Our next phase requires vision and accountability." He smiled, ready to deliver his rehearsed speech, but the words froze when the door opened. Every head turned. She entered, not in tears, not broken. She moved like authority personified, tailored black suit, understated jewelry, her hair sleek and poised. The silence that followed was electric. Even the chairman rose instinctively, as if in deference. He blinked. "What are you doing here?" His voice cracked slightly, swallowed by the room's quiet tension. She didn't answer him. Instead, she walked to the far end of the table, the place reserved for the board's controlling shareholder. Then she set down the leather folder her assistant had carried. "Before we proceed," she said, her voice smooth and controlled, "there's been a change in ownership structure that everyone should be aware of." The chairman nodded, deferential. "Of course, Ms." He hesitated, realizing the title now belonged to her. She smiled faintly. "Let's make this brief." She opened the folder and began distributing documents. Silent, precise. Each page bore the company's insignia and a new signature block. Her name. The controlling shares, once obscured behind layers of investment firms and trusts, were revealed as hers. The room exhaled collectively, shock rippling through it. He looked at her, confusion turning to disbelief. This is impossible," he stammered. "You're not even qualified?" She interrupted softly. "Involved? Intelligent enough?" Her tone never rose, but every word sliced clean through the pretense he'd built. "You've been working for me since the day you started here. Every deal, every promotion, you thought you earned them. You didn't. You were a project." The word landed like a verdict. The chairman adjusted his glasses. "Is this accurate?" She nodded once. "I own 58% of the conglomerate. The rest are subsidiaries under my holding company. Effective immediately, I'm assuming full executive control." His throat tightened. "You can't just—" "I can," she said, "and I just did." The room fell silent again. The mistress beside him shifted uncomfortably, her face paling as the implications settled in. She continued, turning a page. "While reviewing financial records, we discovered irregularities. Joint accounts emptied, company funds misused. I've authorized an internal investigation." Gasps murmured through the board. He felt the walls closing in. "This is revenge," he said bitterly, his mask cracking. "You're doing this because I left you." She met his gaze, steady and cold. "No," she said. "I'm doing this because you revealed who you are." The chairman cleared his throat again, formal now, almost apologetic. "Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Security will escort you out." The words hung like a noose. He stood there, stunned, while she gathered her papers. She didn't look back as she walked out of the conference room. The applause that followed wasn't for him. It was for her. The invisible woman had stepped into the light, and the empire he believed he built had just swallowed him whole. Outside, the city gleamed, unbothered. And as he stood there, stripped of position, status, and illusion, he finally understood what she meant when she said he needed to see what he really owned. Nothing. He stumbled out of the building with security flanking him, the mistress trailing behind as though reality had turned to quicksand beneath her heels. Reporters waited outside, cameras flashing, alerted by someone smarter and faster than him. He tried to shield his face, barking at them that it was a misunderstanding, but every denial sounded like a lie gasping for breath. She didn't witness any of it firsthand. She didn't need to. The collapse had already been orchestrated, each domino placed long before he pushed her away. From the top floor in the office that now officially belonged to her, she stood before another wall of glass, the skyline bowing to her quiet reign. Her ringtone broke the stillness. It was her mother-in-law's number, the woman who once adored her, who treated her like the daughter she never had. A pause, then she answered. "You ruined him," the woman sobbed without greeting. "He's lost his job, his accounts. They froze my retirement funds, everything." Her chest tightened. That was never part of the plan. She hadn't meant for innocent people to get caught in the collapse he triggered. "I didn't freeze your accounts," she replied softly. "His fraud investigations did that. Your pensions are secure, they always were." There was silence on the other end, a fragile, searching silence, as though the older woman didn't recognize the person speaking. The heiress who had been invisible was now undeniable. "Why didn't you tell us who you really were?" the mother asked finally, voice trembling. "Because I wanted to know who loved me without a reason," she whispered. "And now? And now I know." The call ended with no resolution, just a quiet understanding that love and truth often walk opposite directions to survive. That afternoon, the media exploded. Headlines spiraled across every business channel. Hidden heiress emerges CEO, falls in scandal. Unknown power player takes control of empire. Her photograph, a candid capture from the boardroom hallway, circulated everywhere. For years, she'd been the ghost in the room, the quiet wife people overlooked. Now she was a titan. Analysts debated her acquisition strategy, investors praised her discretion, and employees toasted to the woman who had saved the company from a man whose ambition had turned corrosive. She had become a legend overnight, but legends feel loneliness deeper than ordinary people. Late into the night, she returned home to the apartment that still smelled unfamiliar. She set aside her heels, poured herself a glass of red wine, and allowed the weight of everything to sink into her bones. Power could build walls thicker than heartbreak ever could. Her assistant sent a final report for the day. His accounts formally drained of her wealth, the penthouse repossessed, the cars and assets returned to the companies that owned them. Everything he believed he owned had simply reverted back to its rightful place. The mistress? She vanished the moment the money did. He was alone. Meanwhile, she stood on the balcony, wind brushing her hair, the moon a silent witness. She told herself this wasn't revenge, it was release. She hadn't ruined him. She had simply removed the invisible scaffolding that held him upright. If he had been a good man, he would have still stood tall. Instead, he crumbled. The next day, as she attended investor meetings and oversaw new restructuring plans, he wandered the streets of the city he once conquered. His suit wrinkled, his confidence leaking through the cracks. He searched for someone to blame. In the reflection of a store window, he barely recognized the man staring back. He called friends. Most didn't answer. Those who did made excuses. Connections, it turned out, were shallow when power evaporated. He returned to his parents' home that evening, only to find them distressed, confused by letters from banks they didn't understand. In his hollowed-out pride, he went to the only person who might listen. She was leaving the office when he appeared, disheveled, eyes red with rage and desperation. The security team stiffened, but she raised a hand to stop them. He stood there, breath heavy, voice raw. "I loved you," he said. "You think any of this changes that?" She looked at him long, seeing not a monster, but a man who had chosen to become one. "You loved what you thought I could give you," she answered. "You loved power, until you learned it wasn't yours." His fist clenched. "You think you're better than me now?" A sad smile touched her lips. "I was always your equal. You just never bothered to see it." He stepped closer, voice shaking. "You ruined my life." "No," she said. "You built a life made of lies. I just stopped holding it up." Her calmness terrified him more than anger ever could. Before he could speak again, her car arrived. She turned away, signaling this chapter was closing. As she entered the car, she whispered to herself the truth she had once been too afraid to believe. Power revealed who deserved to stand beside it. He never did. The door shut with a gentle click. Quiet, final. She didn't look back. Months passed. The world moved on, but he couldn't. The name that once commanded attention now drew whispers, pity, and headlines of disgrace. Every attempt to rebuild collapsed under the shadow of what he'd done. Former allies avoided him, recruiters declined politely, and investors never returned his calls. His reputation was radioactive, burned by greed, scorched by arrogance. He lived in a small rented room above a mechanic shop on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by reminders of the life he'd lost. His suit hung by the window like a relic of arrogance, collecting dust. The mistress was gone, vanished when the last dollar did. The silence was heavier than loneliness. It was the sound of consequence. Across town, her world flourished. Under her leadership, the conglomerate transformed into a symbol of innovation and integrity. The press called her the invisible hand-turned powerhouse. Women in boardrooms invoked her name like a legend, a reminder that quiet strength could move mountains without thunder. She didn't chase revenge or fame. She chased progress. The empire she rebuilt carried her name now, no longer hidden behind aliases or anonymity. Still, some nights she found herself staring at the city skyline, thinking of what her grandfather once told her. Power is truth wearing a quiet face. She finally understood what he meant. Her grandfather hadn't given her an empire to rule. He'd given her a mirror to see who would stand beside her when she seemed powerless. Her phone buzzed one evening, an unfamiliar number. She almost ignored it until instinct told her otherwise. Hello? Silence, then a voice, weary and familiar. It's me. She didn't ask how he got her number. Why are you calling? I just wanted to see you, he said, one last time. For a long moment, she said nothing. The ache in his voice wasn't anger anymore. It was emptiness. Against reason, she agreed. The next afternoon, she arrived at a downtown cafe near the park, one she used to love for its quiet simplicity. She spotted him immediately, sitting outside with a coffee he couldn't afford, his once polished hands trembling around the paper cup. His hair was unkempt, his eyes sunken. The fall from pride to poverty had carved humility into his face. He rose awkwardly when he saw her, part shame, part hope. You came. I said I would. He studied her, the poise, the elegance, the serenity. She was radiant in a way he had never noticed before. It wasn't wealth. It was peace. I've lost everything, he said quietly. My company, my home, my friends. Even my parents are ashamed. You didn't lose them, she replied. You traded them for illusions. He looked down. I thought I was building something real. You were, she said softly. But you built it on borrowed ground. For a long while they sat in silence. The world around them moved indifferent. Finally, she reached into her bag and placed an envelope on the table. Inside are job listings, references, and an account with enough to start again. It's not charity, she said. It's a choice. You can rebuild or you can repeat. What you do next will show if you've truly learned. He looked at the envelope like it burned. Why are you helping me? Because mercy isn't weakness, she said, and revenge that ends in hate only imprisons both sides. Tears filled his eyes, not from gratitude but from the realization that she had beaten him in every way that mattered. She had power, dignity, compassion, the things he had mistaken for fragility. I'm sorry, he whispered, voice cracking. I know, she said, but sorry doesn't rebuild what arrogance destroyed. She stood to leave, the late afternoon sun glinting off her earrings like fire. He looked up at her, desperate for something. Redemption, forgiveness, a reason to matter again. You loved me once, he said quietly. I did, she replied, and that love built the world you broke. Her driver opened the car door. She hesitated for a moment, then looked back. Take the chance or stay where you are. That's your story to finish now. When she left, he didn't follow. He sat there staring at the envelope, realizing it wasn't money she'd given him. It was the mirror he'd refused to face. Weeks later, she attended a charity gala, her name announced among philanthropists and industry leaders. Cameras flashed, investors shook her hand, and the night hummed with admiration. But her thoughts drifted not to victory, but to balance, to the fine line between power and peace. She had learned that strength wasn't in what she controlled, but in what she could let go of. In the months that followed, she met someone new, an architect, gentle and grounded, who loved her not for her name or her wealth, but for her quiet laughter. Together, they built a home filled with sunlight and honesty, the kind of life that didn't need to hide behind secrecy or pride. And somewhere across the city, he worked quietly at a small firm, rebuilding his life piece by piece. Some nights he'd see her face in newspapers or on billboards and feel the old ache of regret, but also something new. Respect. He would never fully recover from losing her, but perhaps that was the lesson. Some losses are meant to teach, not to torment. Years later, their paths crossed once more, briefly at a charity event. No anger, no bitterness. Just two people who had once shared a storm, now standing under clear skies. She smiled at him. Warm, distant, complete. He nodded, humbled. As she walked away, he realized that her revenge had never been destruction. It was revelation. And in that revelation, she became not the woman he betrayed, but the legacy he could never forget.